You're pining for a daddy you didn't even know, like some sniveling bastard.
That's in a Christopher Nolan film.
You serious?
So what the hell is actually going on here? That's what we're going to figure out today. You remember walking out the Dark Knight the first time? Or when that hallway in Inception and you realized, holy shit, this director actually respects my intelligence. That's Christopher Nolan. The guy who gives us the docking scene in Interstellar, the ticking clock of Dunkirk, the weight of Oppenheimer, the twisted genius of The Prestige, and Memento, which still breaks my brain in the best way possible. Nolan was supposed to be different.
Wow.
He was the guy who cared about authenticity and immersion. The one who made you believe what you were seeing actually mattered. When I heard he was tackling The Odyssey, I felt something I haven't felt about Hollywood in years. Genuine excitement. Finally, someone with actual vision and a massive budget was going to give Greek mythology the treatment it deserves. Not some sanitized cartoon or watered down superhero treatment, but something with weight, texture, the kind of grounded realism that makes ancient mythology feel dangerous and alive again. Then the casting announcements started dropping. At first, you're looking at this roster thinking, okay, Tom Holland, Matt Damon, Zendaya, Robert Pattinson, Anna Hathaway coming back. This is stacked. This is a murderous row of talent attached to a director who knows how to use them. The teaser hits and it's everything you want. Massive ships, ancient Greece rendered with a Nolan texture. The scope feels enormous. The music builds and you're sitting there thinking, this is it. This is going to be the definitive mythological epic that reminds people what cinema can do when you actually care about the world you're building. Then, trailer 2 dropped, and with it came the line. We're talking Robert Pattinson, Ancient Greece, a Christopher Nolan film with a budget north of $250 million. And the line is, you're pining for a daddy you didn't even know, like some sniveling bastard. Pause on that. A Christopher Nolan character just said daddy in a scene set 3,000 years ago. And then there's not just Pattinson. Matt Damon playing Odysseus, the hero of one of the greatest epics ever written, rallies his men with "Let's go!" which is apparently the battle cry they went with.
No way. Yes way.
Then there is the accent situation where Tom Holland, British, and Robert Pattinson, also British, are both speaking with American accent in ancient Greece. And this is in a Nolan film from the same director who rebuilt Los Alamos from scratch for Oppenheimer because period accuracy matters to him. Who grew real corn for Interstellar because he wanted the texture to be real. The same director looked at ancient Greek and decided modern American dialogue and accents were completely fine.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I need someone to explain that to me. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because this isn't random. There's actually a reason for all of it, and it goes deeper than just bad dialogue choices. Nolan has publicly stated that he based the film on Emily Wilson's 2017 translation of The Odyssey. And if you know what that translation is, suddenly everything clicks. Wilson's translation is the first major English translation of The Odyssey by a woman, and it comes with a very specific ideological framework. Odysseus gets reframed not as a hero but as a complicated man, morally ambiguous rather than legendary. The maidservants who are hanged at the end get reframed from traitors who deserve their fate into slaves who were victimized. Penelope gets a more active, almost girl boss rewriting of her character. And the elevated language of the original epic, the very language that made Homer feel mythological, gets stripped away in favor of something more modern, more direct, more accessible. Which explains Daddy and Let's Go and why this film, shot on the most expensive IMAX cameras in history, has dialogue that sounds like it was written for a Netflix teen drama. Nolan didn't stumble into this by accident. He chose the source material that gave him permission to make these choices, and that tells you everything about where this film's head is at. And then there's the Bart. Christopher Nolan, the director of Memento and The Dark Knight, has cast Travis Scott, the rapper, as a bard in his $250 million adaptation of one of the oldest stories in human history. And when people asked why, Nolan didn't apologize for it or try to change the subject. He explains that rap is analogous to Homeric oral poetry, because Homer's epic was originally performed out loud and passed down orally, the same way rap music works today. Now look, on paper that logic isn't completely insane. There's a kernel or something real in there, but it tells you everything about how Nolan is thinking about this material. He's not trying to transport you 3,000 years into the past. He is trying to make ancient Greece feel contemporary, feel modern, feel relevant to an audience that might not otherwise show up, which is a choice you're allowed to make as a filmmaker, but it is the opposite of what made people fall in love with Nolan in the first place. And it is absolutely the same instinct that put daddy in the mouth of Robert Pattinson.
You're pining for a daddy you didn't even know, like some sniveling bastard.
Then we get to the casting. Let's talk about Lupita as Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy is not a minor character with creative casting flexibility. She is the face that launched 1,000 ships, the most beautiful woman in the ancient world, a figure so deeply embedded in Greek culture, Mediterranean aesthetics, and thousands of years of visual tradition that she's arguably the most recognizable woman in the history of mythology. And Nolan cast Lupita. Elon Musk went on X calling it racist against Greek people. Lupita responded. Jimmy Kimmel piled on to mock Musk, and a full news cycle erupted from the whole thing. And here's the problem with that circus. It completely drowned out any conversation about whether the cast actually serves the story, whether Odious' world looks and feels like the world the story demands, and whether the immersion Nolan himself used to treat as sacred is being honored here or quietly abandoned. The Musk versus Lupita headline became the conversation, and that's exactly the kind of noise that lets Hollywood avoid the real question. There are also photos circulating online on Reddit, on X, claiming to show Elliot Page on the set of The Odyssey, covered in mud in what looks like a battle scene. I'm not going to tell you those photos are confirmed. I can verify them, and neither can you. What I can tell you is that Christopher Nolan's production has had every opportunity to deny them, because the photos have been spreading for weeks, covered by outlets, shared tens of thousands of times, and from Nolan's camp there has been no denial. No statement, nothing resembling, "That's not our set," just complete silence. Now, maybe that silence means nothing and they simply don't dignify every internet rumor with a response, which is fair to take, but this is Christopher Nolan, whose team manages his public image with surgical precision and whose production has been running active press for months. Silence from this particular camp isn't nothing. It is a choice. And in the absence of a denial, the rumor keeps growing because something about it feels entirely consistent with every other decision this production has made. If Elliot Page is in this film, nobody who's been paying attention is going to be surprised, and that might be the most telling thing of all. Here's the part that's actually complicated, because I could wrap this up right now and say this movie is going to be a disaster, and that would be easy, but it would also be incomplete. Christopher Nolan shot this film entirely on IMAX 70mm cameras, every single frame, making it the first film in history to do that. He used 2 million feet of film across 6 countries: Morocco, Greece, Italy, Iceland, Scotland, Malta. Tom Holland's performance reportedly made CinemaCon audiences cry, and I don't mean polite applause. I mean actual tears. Zendaya was apparently so good on set that Damon and Holland were openly jealous of the praise she was getting from Nolan. Pre-sales for IMAX sold out half of 22 US venues on day one, and the box office tracking has this at a 1.6 billion global run, meaning the same audience that flooded the comments with daddy memes is apparently still buying tickets. So here's the real question. Not whether this movie will make money, because it almost certainly will, but whether Christopher Nolan actually believes that Emily Wilson's interpretation of Homer is the right one. Whether all of these choices, the dialogue, the accents, the casting, the bard, whether they represent Nolan's genuinely expression of vision, or whether they represent Nolan checking the boxes that got him his $250 million. Because those are two completely different failures. One is an artist who lost the plot, the other is an artist who sold it.
Emotional, damn it!
I keep asking myself which one is worse. I wanted this to be great. I wanted Nolan to remind the world what happens when you give a visionary director a massive budget and the freedom to build a world properly. Instead, we're getting something that can decide if it wants to be a genuine mythological epic or a modern reimagining that uses the Odyssey as a backdrop for contemporary ideology. The crafting is clear there. 2 million feet of IMAX film doesn't lie, but craft without coherence is just expensive noise. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey might be the most visually impressive film of 2026, and also the most frustrating, because everything that makes you excited about it lives alongside everything that makes you question whether the person who made it still cares about the same thing that made him great. And I genuinely don't know which version of this film we're going to get on July 17th.